Marcus Chun adjusted his daughter's backpack one more time before the transport shuttle's doors hissed open. The refugee processing station on Kepler 442b stretched before them like a metallic canyon, filled with thousands of displaced beings from across the galaxy. The emergency evacuation from Earth's outer colonies had brought together species he'd only seen in textbooks. "Stay close to me, Emma," he whispered to his 8-year-old daughter, whose small hand gripped his tightly. Her other arm clutched a worn stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts, a reminder of the home they'd lost when the Vorthan Empire had swept through their sector. The station buzzed with alien languages and the constant hum of translation devices. Towering Zephyrians with their crystalline skin stood in orderly lines, while small, furry Quillan families huddled together near the processing terminals. Security drones floated overhead, their blue scanning lights sweeping continuously across the crowd. Marcus pulled out his identification pad, checking their queue number for the 100th time. They'd been traveling for 6 days on the emergency transport, surviving on protein bars and recycled water. His stomach growled, but he'd given his last nutrition packet to Emma that morning. Her pale face and tired eyes told him she needed it more. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Emma whispered, leaning against his leg. "I know, sweetheart. We'll get some food once we're processed. Just a little longer." The line moved with painful slowness. Each family ahead of them seemed to have complications, requiring additional scans, documentation verification, or medical clearance. Marcus watched a Thraxian mother struggle to explain her family situation to the automated processing system through a malfunctioning translator. Her children, small reptilian beings with iridescent scales, waited patiently despite their obvious exhaustion. Hours passed. Emma had fallen asleep, standing up, leaning against Marcus's leg while he supported her weight. His back ached, and his feet had gone numb, but he didn't dare lose their place in line. Around them, other families shared similar struggles, creating a quiet symphony of exhaustion and determination. A commotion near the station's central hub caught his attention. Security drones were converging on something, their lights shifting from blue to amber. Other refugees began pointing and murmuring in their various languages, creating a wave of nervous energy that rippled through the crowd. "Attention all station personnel and refugees," a voice announced through the station's communication system. "We are currently experiencing a situation with our distinguished guest. Please remain calm and continue with normal processing procedures." Distinguished guest? Marcus craned his neck to see what was happening, but the crowd was too thick and the security barrier too high. Whatever was occurring in the central area was being carefully hidden from the general refugee population. Next family approached Terminal 7. An artificial voice called out. Finally, their turn. Marcus gently shook Emma awake and guided her toward the designated terminal. A holographic interface materialized before them, displaying fields for biometric data, family information, and destination preferences. The scanning beam swept over them both, gathering biological data and checking against various databases. Marcus held his breath, hoping their refugee status wouldn't cause additional delays. After what felt like an eternity, the terminal chimed with approval. "Chen Family Unit, Marcus, and Emma," the system announced. "Refugee status confirmed. Temporary housing assigned to Section C, Level 12, Quarters 247. Food allocation vouchers have been transmitted to your identification pad. Welcome to Kepler Station." Relief flooded through him. They had a place to sleep and food vouchers. It wasn't home, but it was safety. As they collected their belongings and headed toward the residential sections, Marcus noticed the commotion in the central area had intensified. More security personnel were arriving, including several figures in elaborate uniforms he didn't recognize. The amber warning lights had shifted to red, indicating a more serious situation. "Daddy, why are all those people gathering over there?" Emma asked, pointing toward the central hub. "I don't know, sweetheart. Probably just some important meeting. Come on, let's find our room and get you some food." They made their way through the station's corridors, following the directional signs toward the residential sections. The architecture was clearly designed for multiple species, with varying ceiling heights and doorway configurations. Some passages were flooded with different atmospheric compositions, sealed behind energy barriers for non-oxygen breathing inhabitants. Section C was designated for carbon-based, oxygen-breathing refugees, primarily from human colonies and similar worlds. The corridor felt more familiar, though still utilitarian and cold. Emergency housing was never luxurious, but it was functional. Quarters 247 turned out to be a small, but efficient living space with 2 sleeping alcoves, a basic hygiene station, and a food preparation area. The walls were stark white, and the single window looked out onto the station's docking bay where ships of various sizes continued to arrive with more refugees. Emma immediately claimed the lower, sleeping alcove, arranging Mr. Peanuts carefully on the thin pillow. "It's like a spaceship room, Daddy." Marcus smiled at her resilience. Children adapted so much better than adults to dramatic changes. He activated his identification pad and accessed their food allocation. They had enough credits for 3 days of basic meals from the station's automated food dispensers, with the possibility of extension based on processing delays. "Let's go get some real food," he said, taking Emma's hand again. The food court was located on level 8, a vast space filled with dispensers catering to dozens of different species' dietary requirements. The human-compatible section offered a selection of protein cubes, vegetable paste, fruit supplements, and various grain-based products. It was nutritionally complete, but hardly appetizing. Marcus selected a protein cube meal for Emma and a vegetable paste portion for himself. They found seats at a metal table overlooking the main concourse, with a constant flow of refugees continued. "This tastes like cardboard," Emma said, poking at her protein cube with a provided utensil. "I know, but it's food. Eat what you can." Marcus forced down a spoonful of the gray vegetable paste, suppressing the urge to grimace. He'd eaten worse during his service years, but that didn't make it pleasant. As they ate, Marcus couldn't help but think about their situation. The refugee status would eventually lead to resettlement, but where Earth's outer colonies were gone, either destroyed or occupied by Vorthan forces. The inner colonies were overcrowded with previous waves of refugees. Mars was an option, but the terraforming wasn't complete, and life there was harsh. His thoughts were interrupted by another announcement echoing through the food court. "Attention station personnel. Code 7 situation continues in the central sector. All non-essential personnel are advised to maintain distance from the diplomatic area." Code 7. Marcus didn't recognize the designation, but the increased security presence suggested something significant was happening. Around the food court, other refugees were murmuring about the situation, sharing rumors and speculation in various languages. An elderly Zephyrian at a nearby table was speaking to his family in accented standard. Marcus caught fragments of the conversation. Royal delegation. Refusing all offerings, diplomatic crisis. Royal delegation? That would explain the security presence and the designation as a distinguished guest. Some alien royalty was visiting the station, probably arranging refugee placements or negotiating settlement terms. "Daddy, can we explore the station after we eat?" Emma asked. Her appetite slightly improved as she worked through the protein cube. "We can walk around a little, but we should stay in the residential areas. There seems to be some kind of important meeting happening, and we don't want to get in the way." They finished their meal and disposed of the packaging in the recycling units. Marcus checked his identification pad for the station layout and planned a route through the safe areas where Emma could stretch her legs and see more of their temporary home. The recreational areas were modest but thoughtfully designed. There was a small park with artificial trees and grass where children from various species played together despite language barriers. Emma immediately gravitated toward a group of kids her age, including 2 human children and a young Thraxian whose scales sparkled in the artificial sunlight. Marcus sat on a nearby bench, watching his daughter play for the first time in weeks. The sound of children's laughter was universal, regardless of species, and It helped ease some of the tension he'd been carrying since their evacuation. A middle-aged human woman sat down beside him, looking equally tired but relieved. Her son was playing with the same group of children. "Refugee Transport Delta 7, she asked. "Delta 9, actually. Arrived this morning." "You?" "Yesterday evening." "I'm Sarah Mitchell, and that's my son Tommy." She pointed to a boy slightly older than Emma, who was showing the other children how to throw a ball. "Marcus Chun, and that's Emma. She's 8. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both parents simply enjoying the sight of their children playing safely. "Any word on resettlement options?" Sarah asked. "Not yet. We just got processed a few hours ago." They mentioned Mars, New Geneva, or one of the outer research stations. None of them sound particularly appealing for raising kids, but she shrugged. "Better than Vorthan occupation." Marcus nodded. The Vorthan Empire had a reputation for brutal efficiency in managing conquered territories. Humans were considered useful for manual labor and technical work, but were rarely treated as anything more than valuable assets. Another announcement echoed through the recreational area, this time with a different tone. "Attention, all station residents. We are pleased to report that our distinguished guest situation is stabilizing. However, we ask for your continued patience as diplomatic protocols are observed." "Wonder what that's all about," Sarah mused. "Some kind of royal delegation, from what I overheard. Probably working out refugee placement agreements with various worlds." Their conversation was interrupted by excited shouts from the children. Emma came running over, her face flushed with excitement. "Daddy, Tommy says there's a real dragon on the station." "A space dragon?" Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm. "That sounds exciting, but I think Tommy might be exaggerating a little." "No, really." Tommy had followed Emma over. "My mom heard some of the station workers talking about it. There's a dragon queen visiting, and she's been here for 3 days, but she won't eat anything they offer her." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That's quite an imagination you have there, son." "It's not imagination. Ask anyone." Marcus was beginning to wonder if there might be some truth to the children's story. The security presence, the diplomatic protocols, the Code 7 situation, it all fit with hosting an important alien dignitary. And if that dignitary happened to be from a species humans had nicknamed dragons based on their appearance, the children's interpretation wouldn't be far off. "Tell you what," he said to Emma. "Tomorrow we can ask at the information desk about tour opportunities. Maybe they'll have some educational programs about the different species on the station." Emma clapped her hands excitedly. "Can we see the dragon?" "We'll see what's possible, sweetheart." As the artificial day cycle began to dim, families started gathering their children and heading back to their quarters. Marcus and Emma made their way back through the corridors, past the food courts and processing areas, back to their small but secure room in Section C. Emma was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, exhausted from the day's excitement and the weeks of travel. Marcus sat by the small window, looking out at the docking bay where new ships continued to arrive. Each vessel brought more families like his own, displaced by war and seeking safety among the stars. He thought about Tommy's story about the Dragon Queen. Even if it was true, what could it possibly have to do with them? They were just refugees, grateful for a safe place to sleep and enough food to survive. Whatever diplomatic situation was unfolding in the station's central sector was far above their concerns. But as he prepared for sleep himself, Marcus couldn't shake a strange feeling that their arrival at this particular station, at this particular time, was more than just coincidence. The galaxy was vast, and the chances of any single refugee family making a difference in alien diplomacy seemed impossibly small. Yet something in the back of his mind, an instinct developed through years of military service and single parenthood, suggested that their journey was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps answers to questions he didn't even know he should be asking. For now, though, they were safe. Emma was sleeping peacefully, Mr. Peanuts tucked under her arm, dreaming of space dragons and new adventures. That was enough for one day. Marcus settled into his own sleeping alcove, listening to the gentle hum of the station's life support systems and the distant murmur of thousands of beings finding their way in an uncertain galaxy. Despite everything they'd lost, they still had each other, and that gave him hope for whatever tomorrow might bring. Outside their window, the stars wheeled silently in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of refugee families and diplomatic crises. But somewhere among those stars was a new home waiting for them, and Marcus was determined to find it, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. The morning shift alarm echoed softly through the residential quarters, bringing Marcus out of a restless sleep. Emma was still curled up with Mr. Peanuts, peaceful in the way only children could manage, even in strange places. He checked his identification pad. They had 3 more days of food allocation before he'd need to find some kind of work assignment to extend their stay. After a quiet breakfast of protein cubes and synthetic fruit juice, they decided to explore more of the station. Emma had been asking about the dragon story since she woke up, and Marcus figured they could at least visit the public areas and satisfy her curiosity. The information desk in the main concourse was staffed by a holographic interface designed to accommodate multiple species. Marcus approached and requested information about educational tours or public programs. "I apologize, but all cultural exchange programs and diplomatic area tours are currently suspended," the interface replied in perfect standard. "We are experiencing an ongoing situation with our distinguished guest that requires enhanced security protocols." "What kind of situation?" Emma piped up before Marcus could stop her. The hologram paused for a moment, accessing approved information. "Her Radiance, Queen Silthareth of the Draknari Sovereignty, has been conducting diplomatic negotiations regarding refugee resettlement opportunities. However, there have been some unexpected complications in the hospitality protocols." Marcus felt his eyebrows rise. The children hadn't been exaggerating after all. There really was what humans would call a dragon queen on the station. "Is everything all right? Nothing dangerous?" he asked. "All security measures are precautionary. Queen Silthareth poses no threat to station inhabitants. The complications are of a dietary nature." Before Marcus could ask for clarification, an urgent announcement cut through the concourse. "Medical team to Diplomatic Sector 7. Repeat, medical team to Diplomatic Sector 7. Code Yellow situation." The hologram immediately shifted to emergency protocol mode. "I apologize, but I must terminate this session to assist with priority communications. Please enjoy your stay on Kepler Station." The interface disappeared, leaving Marcus and Emma standing in the concourse as security drones began moving with increased urgency toward the central sector. Other refugees were gathering in small groups, murmuring about the announcement and the increased activity. "Daddy, what's code yellow?" Emma asked, gripping his hand tighter. "Probably just a medical checkup," Marcus replied, though his military experience told him otherwise. Code yellow usually meant a health emergency that wasn't immediately life-threatening, but required prompt attention. They were walking toward the recreational area when a commotion erupted near the security checkpoint leading to the diplomatic sector. A group of beings in elaborate uniforms were arguing loudly with station security, their translator devices working overtime to manage the heated conversation. Marcus recognized the species from news reports, Draknari. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with scale-covered humanoid bodies, elongated necks, and heads that were distinctly reptilian, yet somehow regal. Their scales shimmered with an inner light that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on the angle of view. These must be Queen Silthareth's retinue. One of them, wearing what appeared to be a ceremonial medallion, was speaking in rapid, urgent tones. The translation reached Marcus's ears as fragmented phrases: "refuses all nourishment, 3rd day, cultural misunderstanding, unprecedented situation." A human in a station administrator's uniform was trying to calm the situation. "We've consulted our xenobiological database. We're providing nutrition that should be compatible with Draknari physiology. Our best chefs have prepared—" "You do not understand," the medallion Draknari interrupted. "Her Radiance is not merely refusing food. She has declared a hunger strike until her condition for diplomatic negotiations is met. What condition? We thought the refugee resettlement discussions were proceeding well. The Draknari exchanged glances among themselves before the spokesman continued. Her radiance has detected something, a scent, a presence that calls to her. She demands to meet the source before any agreements can be finalized. The station administrator looked baffled. A scent? I don't understand. What kind of scent? We do not know. She describes it as the essence of protection and parental love given form. She insists this presence holds the key to understanding your human refugee's true nature. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Parental love? The Draknari were known for their incredibly advanced sense of smell, capable of detecting pheromones and biochemical signatures across vast distances. Could the Queen somehow be sensing something about the refugee families on the station? This is unprecedented, the administrator was saying. We can't simply present random refugees to a sovereign ruler. There are protocols, security concerns. Then, her radiance will continue to refuse nourishment, the Draknari spokesman declared. She has made her position clear. The negotiations cannot proceed until this matter is resolved. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, are they talking about us? About the refugee families? Before he could answer, one of the security drones approached their group. Citizen Shun, please report to Processing Station 12 for additional documentation review. Marcus's blood ran cold. Why were they being singled out? Had they done something wrong? He took Emma's hand, and they made their way to the processing area, passing the still-arguing diplomatic group. As they walked by, Marcus noticed one of the Draknari suddenly stop mid-sentence and turn toward them. The being's nostrils flared, and its eyes widened with what looked like recognition. The spokesman immediately broke off his conversation with the administrator and approached the security drone escorting Marcus and Emma. Wait, stop them. The drone paused, its sensors focusing on the Draknari. Is there a security concern? No, the Draknari replied, his voice filled with wonder. There is no concern. There is possibility. He moved closer to Marcus and Emma, his head tilting slightly as he breathed in carefully. You, he said, addressing Marcus directly. You carry the scent, the one her radiance seeks. Marcus instinctively moved Emma behind him. I don't understand what you're talking about. Your biochemical signature, the Draknari explained excitedly. It carries markers of deep protective instinct, self-sacrifice, unconditional love. And he paused, breathing in again something else, something familiar. The station administrator had caught up to them. What's going on here? You can't just interrogate random refugees. This is not random, the Draknari insisted. This human and his offspring, they are who her radiance has been seeking. I must inform her immediately. Now wait just a minute, Marcus interjected. I don't know what this is about, but my daughter and I are just refugees trying to find safe passage to a new home. We're not involved in any diplomatic situation. The Draknari's expression softened. You misunderstand. You're not in trouble. You may be the solution to a crisis that threatens not only our negotiations, but our queen's health. What kind of solution? Her radiance has not eaten in 3 days. Among our people, hunger strikes are sacred vows that cannot be broken until specific conditions are met. She has declared that she must meet the source of what she calls the pure scent of devotion before she can proceed with any official business. Marcus looked down at Emma, who was peering out from behind his leg with wide eyes. This was beyond anything he'd expected when they'd arrived at the refugee station. I still don't understand what you think I have that your queen needs. The Draknari spokesman gestured to his companions, and they began speaking rapidly in their own language. After a moment, he turned back to Marcus. Among our people, scent carries meaning beyond your human understanding. Her radiance possesses the most refined olfactory sensitivity in our species' history. She can detect not just chemical compounds, but the emotional and spiritual essences they carry. He paused, seeming to search for the right words and standard. When she detected your scent signature yesterday, she described it as the perfect manifestation of protective love. Such a scent is considered sacred among our people, associated with the most noble of parental bonds. The station administrator was frantically taking notes on his datapad. This is highly irregular. We can't just present refugees to visiting royalty without proper protocols. The protocols must be adapted, the Draknari insisted. Her Radiance's health is at stake, and the refugee resettlement negotiations affect millions of displaced beings. This is bigger than normal procedures. Emma stepped out from behind Marcus. Is the Dragon Queen really sick because she won't eat? The Draknari knelt down to Emma's eye level, his intimidating size becoming somehow gentler. Yes, little one. Our queen is very stubborn when she believes something important must be done. She will not break her fast until she understands what is called to her so strongly. Maybe she just needs a different kind of food, Emma suggested with the simple logic of childhood. When I'm sad, sometimes only daddy's sandwiches make me feel better. The Draknari's eyes widened, and he exchanged rapid words with his companions. Sandwiches? Were these sandwiches? Marcus couldn't help but smile at Emma's innocent suggestion. She's talking about food I used to make for her back home. Nothing special, just comfort food. Describe this food, the Draknari requested urgently. Well, bread with various fillings. Emma's favorite was peanut butter and honey with sliced apples. Simple ingredients, but Marcus trailed off, remembering countless mornings when he'd carefully prepared Emma's lunch before school, making sure everything was cut perfectly and wrapped with care. The Draknari was speaking rapidly to his companions again. One of them produced a communication device and began transmitting information. Her Radiance wishes to meet with you immediately, the spokesman announced. She specifically requests to experience these sandwiches you speak of. The station administrator stepped forward. This is highly unusual. We'll need security clearances, diplomatic immunity waivers, cultural sensitivity briefings. There is no time for extensive preparations, the Draknari interrupted. Her radiance grows weaker with each passing hour. She has agreed to break her fast only if she can experience the source of the scent that is called to her. Marcus looked down at Emma, then back at the assembled group. Part of him wanted to refuse, to take Emma and retreat to their quarters until this diplomatic crisis resolved itself. But another part, the part that had always pushed him to help others when he could, recognized that this might be bigger than their personal comfort. What exactly would this meeting involve, he asked. Simply bringing your food preparation to our diplomatic suite and allowing her radiance to experience both the meal and the emotional essence of its creation. Nothing more than sharing a meal, but one prepared with the same care you would show your own daughter. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, if we can help the Dragon Queen feel better, shouldn't we try? Out of the mouths of babes. Marcus realized that Emma was right. If they could help resolve a crisis that affected millions of refugees, how could they refuse? All right, he said finally. But I have conditions. Emma's safety is my top priority. If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. Agreed, the Draknari spokesman said quickly. Her radiance is gentle by nature, despite her impressive size. Your daughter will be perfectly safe. The station administrator sighed. I'll need to file emergency diplomatic protocol modifications. This is going to require approvals from 3 different departments. Then approve quickly, the Draknari urged. Every moment of delay makes our queen's condition worse. As the various officials began making rapid communications and arrangements, Marcus found himself wondering how his simple refugee status had suddenly become entangled with interstellar diplomacy. But as he looked at Emma's excited face and thought about the millions of families like theirs who needed safe homes, he realized that sometimes the most important moments in history started with the smallest gestures. Daddy, Emma whispered, do you think the Dragon Queen will like Mr. Peanuts? Marcus smiled, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear. I think she's going to like you just fine, sweetheart. Both of you. The wheels of diplomacy were turning, and somehow, A simple father-daughter sandwich-making session had become the key to unlocking a crisis that had stumped politicians and negotiators. Marcus just hoped he could live up to whatever expectations were building around him, and, more importantly, that Emma's innocent wisdom might be exactly what a homesick dragon queen needed to remember why she was fighting so hard for refugee families in the first place. 2 hours later, Marcus found himself standing outside the most heavily secured door he'd ever seen. The diplomatic suite occupied an entire section of the station's upper level, with energy barriers, armed guard from multiple species, and scanning devices that hummed with sophisticated technology. Emma held his hand tightly, her other arm clutching Mr. Peanut's. The stuffed elephant had somehow passed all security screenings, though Marcus suspected that had more to do with Emma's tears when they'd initially tried to separate her from it than any diplomatic consideration. Remember, the Draknari spokesman, who had introduced himself as Ambassador Kithrak, said quietly, "Her radiance has been without food for 3 days. She may appear weakened, but her mental faculties remain sharp. Show respect, but do not be intimidated." She specifically requested informality for this meeting. Marcus adjusted the small bag containing ingredients he'd somehow managed to procure from the station's food services. Bread, peanut butter substitute, synthetic honey, and preserved fruit slices. Not exactly the artisanal ingredients he would have preferred, but they would have to do. The energy barrier dissolved, and the massive doors slid open with barely a whisper. The chamber beyond was enormous, with high vaulted ceilings and atmospheric processors that created a humid warmth Marcus hadn't felt since leaving the outer colonies. Bioluminescent panels provided soft, natural lighting that seemed to shift between purple and gold. And there, coiled gracefully on a raised platform at the chamber's center, was Queen Silthareth. Marcus had seen images of Draknari in news feeds, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of meeting their sovereign. She was massive, easily 30 feet from nose to tail tip, but proportioned with an elegant grace that made her presence majestic rather than threatening. Her scales were indeed like living jewels, shifting through spectrums of deep purple, silver, and occasional flashes of brilliant gold. Her head was distinctly reptilian, but somehow noble, with intelligent eyes that seemed ancient and knowing. When she turned her attention to them, Marcus felt a brief moment of vertigo, as if those eyes could see directly into his soul. "Your Radiance," Ambassador Kithrak said, performing an elaborate bow. "I present Marcus Chun and his daughter Emma, the humans whose essence called to you." Queen Silthareth's response came not as words, but as a low harmonic sound that seemed to resonate through the chamber's walls. The translation devices rendered it as standard. "Approach. Let me see you clearly." Marcus stepped forward, Emma beside him, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. As they drew closer, he noticed that the queen's scales had lost some of their luster, and her movements seemed slower than they should be. 3 days without food was clearly taking its toll. "You are the source of the scent," she said, her translated voice carrying notes of wonder and exhaustion. "The essence of protective devotion. It called to me across the station like a beacon." "Your Radiance," Marcus began, uncertain of proper protocol. "I'm honored to meet you, though I'm not sure I understand what you're sensing." The queen's great head tilted slightly, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "Among my people, scent carries truth that words cannot hide. You bear the mark of one who would sacrifice everything for his offspring. Such love is rare and sacred." She turned her attention to Emma, who was staring up at the Dragon Queen with open fascination rather than fear. "And you, small one, you carry the scent of absolute trust. You believe completely in your father's protection." Emma stepped forward boldly. "Are you really sick because you won't eat? That's not healthy." A sound like distant thunder rumbled from the queen's throat, which the translators interpreted as laughter. "You speak truth with the clarity of youth. Yes, I have declared a fast until certain conditions are met. Daddy makes the best sandwiches when I'm sad or scared," Emma continued. "Maybe you just need comfort food too." Queen Siltharetha's eyes widened, and she lowered her head to Emma's level. "Tell me about these sandwiches, young one." "Well," Emma said, settling into storytelling mode, "Daddy always cuts them just right, and he puts little notes in my lunchbox, and he makes sure they're wrapped so they stay fresh. When the mean kids at school made fun of my stuffed elephant, Daddy made me an extra special sandwich with 3 different kinds of fruit, and it made everything better." Marcus watched in amazement as his daughter, completely unintimidated by the massive alien sovereign, launched into a detailed description of various sandwich combinations and the emotional significance of each. The Queen listened intently, her translator working to convey not just Emma's words, but somehow the joy and love behind them. "Your Radiance," Marcus interrupted gently. "If I may ask, what is it about us that has caused this situation?" The Queen raised her head, considering her answer carefully. "For 3 days, your station officials have offered me the finest delicacies from across known space. Exotic proteins, rare fruits, dishes prepared by master chefs of a dozen species. All nutritionally perfect, all aesthetically beautiful." She paused, a note of sadness entering her translated voice. "But they carried no love, no emotional resonance, no connection to the heart of the one who prepared them." Marcus was beginning to understand. "You're not just hungry for food." "Precisely. Among my people, we believe that nourishment comes not just from nutrients, but from the emotional essence infused during preparation. A meal prepared with love and care carries spiritual sustenance that mere ingredients cannot provide." She gestured toward the bags of ingredients Marcus carried. "When your scent reached me yesterday, it carried the essence of countless meals prepared with devotion. Food made not because it was required, but because it was an expression of love." Emma clapped her hands together. "Like when Daddy makes pancakes on Sunday mornings, even though he's tired from work." "Exactly like that, small one." Marcus felt a growing understanding of why their simple refugee presence had become so significant. "You're homesick," he said quietly. "All this formal diplomacy, all these official protocols, they don't carry the emotional comfort you need." Queen Siltharetha's response was so quiet the translators barely caught it. "I've been away from my home world for 6 months, negotiating refugee placements across 17 different systems. I'm tired, and I miss the simple comfort of food prepared by those who care for me." The vulnerability in that admission struck Marcus powerfully. This wasn't just an alien dignitary making unreasonable demands. This was someone far from home, emotionally exhausted, and craving the kind of simple human connection that transcended species. "Well then," Marcus said, setting down his ingredient bag, "let me make you a proper sandwich." He found a preparation area that had been set up near the Queen's platform and began working. As he spread peanut butter substitute on bread, he found himself thinking not just about the mechanical process, but about all the times he'd done this same task for Emma. The careful attention to proportions, the way he always trimmed the crusts because she didn't like them, the little decorative touches that made a simple meal special. Emma stood beside him, offering commentary and suggestions. "Make sure the apple slices are even, Daddy. And don't forget to cut it diagonal. Sandwiches always taste better when they're triangles." Marcus smiled, following her advice with the same care he'd always shown. As he worked, he began talking, letting the routine of meal preparation bring out the natural flow of conversation he'd always shared with Emma during their kitchen time together. "You know, Your Radiance, Emma's right about comfort food. It's not about the ingredients being exotic or expensive. It's about the attention, the care, the fact that someone is thinking about what will make you feel better." Queen Silthareth watched intently, her great head following his movements with fascination. "Continue." "When Emma was smaller, she went through a phase where she'd only eat foods that were arranged in specific patterns. Not because she was being difficult, but because routine and familiarity made her feel safe in a world that sometimes seemed too big and uncertain." He finished assembling the sandwich and carefully cut it into triangles, arranging them on a plate with the apple slices fanned out decoratively. Being far from home, dealing with big responsibilities, missing the people, and places that make you feel centered. I think everyone needs comfort food sometimes. Emma nodded sagely, especially when you're trying to help lots of people and you don't get to think about yourself. Marcus carried the plate toward the Queen's platform, Emma walking beside him. It's not much, he said. Just simple ingredients put together with care. But it's made the same way I'd make it for Emma when she needs to know someone is thinking about her happiness. Queen Silthareth lowered her great head toward the plate, her nostrils flaring as she breathed in the scent. For a long moment, she was perfectly still, and Marcus worried that his simple offering was inadequate. Then, with surprising delicacy for such a large being, she used the tip of her tongue to taste one of the triangle sections. Her eyes closed, and that harmonic rumble returned, but softer this time, more like a purr than thunder. The flavor is unusual, she said finally, but the essence. She paused, seeming to search for words. It carries the warmth of 1,000 small kindnesses, the weight of devotion freely given. The comfort of knowing one is cherished. She consumed the rest of the sandwich slowly, savoring not just the taste, but apparently the emotional resonance Marcus had unconsciously infused into its creation. When she finished, she looked directly at him with those ancient, knowing eyes. You have given me more nourishment in these few minutes than all the grand feast offerings of the past 3 days combined. Marcus felt a strange mixture of pride and humility. I'm glad it helped, your radiance. There is something else, the Queen continued. The reason your scent called to me so powerfully, the reason I could not proceed with official business until I met you. She gestured toward Emma, who was beaming with pride at their diplomatic success. Your devotion to your offspring reminds me why these refugee negotiations matter. It is not about moving populations or managing resources. It is about preserving the bonds between those who love each other. The Queen's voice grew stronger as she spoke. Too often, in the machinery of diplomacy, we lose sight of what we are truly protecting. Your presence here, your willingness to share something as simple as a meal prepared with love, has reminded me of the fundamental truth that drives all meaningful negotiation. She turned toward Ambassador Kithrak. Contact the station administrators. I am ready to resume negotiations, but with new parameters. I want to meet with representative refugee families, not just government officials. I want to understand the emotional needs of these displaced people, not just their logistical requirements. Marcus felt a surge of understanding. You want to make sure the resettlement plans account for more than just housing and employment. Exactly. Families need more than mere survival. They need the opportunity to rebuild the emotional connections that make life worth living. They need communities where love can flourish, where parents can prepare comfort food for their children, where the bonds between generations can be maintained. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Does this mean we help solve the Dragon Queen's problem? Queen Silthareth lowered her head again, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. You have done more than that, brave one. You have reminded a tired diplomat why her work matters. She looked back at Marcus. I have a proposal for you, Marcus Chun. These negotiations will continue for several days as we develop new frameworks for refugee resettlement. I would like you and Emma to remain as informal consultants, representatives of the families whose welfare we are determining. Marcus blinked in surprise. I'm not sure I'm qualified for diplomatic consultation. You are qualified in the only way that matters. You understand what it means to love someone so much that their welfare becomes more important than your own comfort. That is the perspective these negotiations need. Ambassador Kithrak stepped forward. Her radiance, this is highly unusual, involving refugees directly in diplomatic proceedings, is exactly what should have been done from the beginning. The Queen interrupted firmly. How can we make decisions about people's lives without understanding their hearts? Marcus looked down at Emma, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of helping with such important work. Then he thought about the thousands of other families on the station, all hoping for safe homes where they could rebuild their lives with dignity. If you think we can help, he said finally, then we're honored to try. Queen Siltharetha's harmonic purr filled the chamber. Excellent. Tomorrow we begin developing resettlement protocols that account for both practical needs and emotional welfare. But for now, she gestured toward the preparation area. Perhaps you could teach my staff how to prepare these comfort sandwiches. I suspect I will need their sustenance in the days ahead. Emma clapped her hands together. Can I help teach them? I know all the secret techniques. I would be delighted to learn from such an expert, the Queen replied solemnly. As Marcus began gathering ingredients for an impromptu cooking lesson, he reflected on how dramatically their situation had changed in just a few hours. They'd arrived as anonymous refugees seeking passage to anywhere safe. Now they were somehow diplomatic consultants helping to shape policies that would affect millions of displaced families. But perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not more bureaucrats and policy experts, but people who understood what it really meant to build a home, raise a family, and care for those you love. Maybe the most important diplomatic qualification wasn't training or credentials, but simply having a heart that knew how to transform simple ingredients into expressions of love. Emma was already explaining to a fascinated Ambassador Kithrak the crucial importance of cutting sandwiches diagonally, and Marcus realized that sometimes the most profound changes in the universe began with the smallest acts of kindness shared between unlikely friends. 3 days later, Marcus found himself seated at a conference table that had been hastily reconfigured to accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and physiologies. The diplomatic suite had been transformed into something resembling a cross between a formal negotiation chamber and a comfortable living room, complete with food preparation areas and spaces designed for families rather than just officials. Queen Silthareth coiled gracefully along one side of the expanded table, her scales now restored to their full lustrous glory. Regular meals of comfort food prepared with genuine care had done more than mere nutrition could accomplish. She seemed energized, focused, and completely transformed from the weakened being Marcus had first met. Emma sat beside him in a specially sized chair, Mr. Peanuts in her lap, and a data pad in front of her containing what she called her important notes about families. She had taken her role as family representative very seriously, conducting informal interviews with dozens of other refugee children and compiling what amounted to the most honest assessment of refugee needs that the diplomatic process had ever received. The other participants included Ambassador Kithrak, several station administrators, representatives from 17 different potential resettlement worlds, and, most importantly, a dozen other refugee families who had been invited to share their perspectives directly. Marcus still couldn't quite believe how rapidly everything had changed. What had started as a simple act of kindness, making a sandwich for someone who was homesick, had evolved into a complete restructuring of how refugee resettlement negotiations were conducted. Before we discuss the specific proposals, Queen Silthareth began, her translated voice carrying new strength and authority. I want to establish our fundamental principle. We are not simply moving populations from one location to another. We are helping people rebuild their lives, their communities, and their capacity for joy. She gestured toward the refugee families around the table. These individuals are not numbers in a resource allocation spreadsheet. They are parents, children, grandparents, and communities whose bonds must be preserved and nurtured if our resettlement efforts are to be truly successful. The representative from New Geneva, a human colonial world with significant refugee capacity, shifted uncomfortably. Your Radiance, while we appreciate the humanitarian concerns, we also have practical limitations. Housing, employment, resource allocation. These are complex logistical challenges. Indeed they are, the Queen agreed. But there are challenges that must be solved with understanding of what these families truly need, not just what is minimally adequate for survival. Emma raised her hand, and the room fell silent. Over the past few days, the 8-year-old had somehow become the most respected voice at the negotiating table, primarily because she asked questions that adults had forgotten were important. Mr. Geneva Person, she said seriously, do you have places where kids can play together? and where mommies and daddies can make food that reminds them of home. The new Geneva representative, Director Chun, no relation to Marcus, looked flustered. Well, we have standard recreational facilities and adequate nutrition distribution systems. That's not what I asked. Emma continued with the relentless logic of childhood. I asked if you have places where families can feel like families. Marcus felt a surge of pride, watching his daughter articulate concerns that had taken the professional diplomat's days to even recognize. She had an innate understanding that the most important aspects of home weren't about buildings or systems, but about the emotional spaces where love could flourish. A Thraxian family representative, a mother with 2 young children, spoke up. The child speaks wisdom. My family fled from the Vorthan occupation with nothing but hope for a place where our traditions could survive. We need more than shelter. We need the opportunity to pass our culture to our children. Queen Silthareth nodded approvingly. This is precisely the perspective that has been missing from previous resettlement efforts. We have been so focused on physical survival that we have forgotten the spiritual and cultural survival that makes life worth living. The representative from Kepler Prime, an established human world with strong infrastructure, leaned forward. Your Radiance, I think we understand your concerns, but how do we quantify cultural preservation needs? How do we budget for emotional welfare? Marcus found himself speaking before he'd fully planned what to say. You start by asking different questions. Instead of how many people can we house, you ask, how can we help these families rebuild their sense of home? Instead of what jobs are available, you ask, how can these people contribute their skills and knowledge to strengthen our communities? He looked around the table, seeing nods from other refugee families and thoughtful expressions from several world representatives. Emma and I live in our quarters here for a week before anyone asked us what we were good at, what we miss from our old home, or what we hope for beyond just safety. Those questions matter. Director Chun from New Geneva consulted her data pad. What kind of questions should we be asking? Emma perked up immediately. I made a list. She consulted her own notes with the gravity of a seasoned diplomat. Do kids have friends to play with? Can families cook food that smells like home? Do grown-ups have work that makes them proud? Are there places for grandparents to tell stories? She looked up from her pad. And, really important, are there libraries with books in different languages and art supplies and music and places where families can celebrate their special days? Ambassador Kithrak had been taking detailed notes throughout Emma's presentation. Her Radiance, perhaps we should formalize these considerations into our evaluation criteria. Queen Silthareth's harmonic purr filled the chamber. An excellent suggestion. I propose that we develop a new framework for resettlement evaluation, one that weighs cultural sustainability and community integration as heavily as logistical capacity. The representative from Kepler Prime raised her hand. I'd like to propose that my world serve as a pilot program for this new approach. We have been struggling with integrating previous refugee populations, and I think this framework might address some of our ongoing challenges. Marcus felt a flicker of interest. Kepler Prime had a good reputation for refugee treatment, and their willingness to experiment with new approaches suggested genuine commitment to improvement. Tell us about your current refugee communities, Queen Silthareth requested. We have approximately 50,000 refugees from various conflicts integrated across 12 cities. The Kepler Prime representative, Administrator Singh, explained. Housing and employment levels are adequate, but we've noticed high levels of depression, family fragmentation, and cultural isolation. Many refugees report feeling grateful for safety, but not truly connected to their new communities. Emma raised her hand again. Do the refugee kids go to school with the regular kids? Or do they have separate schools? Administrator Singh hesitated. Currently, we have specialized integration programs that help refugee children adapt to our educational standards. Separate schools, Emma said flatly. That's not good. Kids need to make friends with all kinds of kids. The Thraxian mother nodded emphatically. My children attended such integration programs on our previous resettlement world. They learned your language and customs, but they also learned that their own heritage was somehow insufficient. Marcus watched Queen Silthareth absorb this information with obvious concern. Administrator Singh, what percentage of your refugee population reports satisfaction with their resettlement? Singh consulted her data pad reluctantly. Approximately 37% report high satisfaction levels. And the rest? They report gratitude for safety, but describe their situation as surviving rather than living. The room fell silent. Marcus realized that they were quantifying something that most resettlement programs probably never measured, the difference between survival and actual quality of life. Your Radiance, Marcus said slowly. What if we approach this differently? What if instead of moving refugees to fit existing systems, we worked with host communities to create new systems that benefited everyone? Queen Silthareth's eyes fixed on him with intense interest. Explain. Well, Emma mentioned libraries with books in different languages. What if instead of just providing that for refugees, host communities recognized it as an educational opportunity for their own children? Cultural exchange instead of cultural accommodation. Emma bounced in her chair excitedly. Like how Tommy taught me to play that Zephyrian counting game, and I taught him how to make paper airplanes. Exactly like that. Mutual enrichment instead of one-way integration. Administrator Singh was taking rapid notes. That's actually brilliant. We've been thinking about refugee integration as a burden on our systems rather than an opportunity to strengthen them. The representative from the Centauri colonies, who had been quiet throughout most of the session, suddenly leaned forward. We've been developing something similar by accident. Our refugee population includes master craftspeople, artists, and technical specialists whose skills have enhanced our local industries. But we never formalized the process. Queen Silthareth's excitement was becoming visible in the increased luminescence of her scales. Now we are approaching the heart of sustainable resettlement, communities that grow stronger through diversity rather than simply absorbing displaced populations. Ambassador Kithrak raised a concern. Her Radiance, this approach will require significantly more initial investment than standard resettlement protocols. Host worlds may resist the additional complexity. Perhaps, the Queen replied, but consider the long-term benefits. Integrated communities with high satisfaction rates, reduced need for ongoing social services, enhanced cultural and economic diversity, and, most importantly, refugee families that thrive rather than merely survive. Emma had been listening to the adult conversation with the focused attention she usually reserved for her favorite stories. Queen Dragon Lady, she said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She had never used such informal address before, and Marcus held his breath. Yes, little diplomat, Queen Silthareth replied with gentle amusement. Can families choose where they want to go? Like if a family really likes music, can they go to a place with lots of music? Or if they like gardens, can they go where there are beautiful gardens? The question was so simple and obvious that Marcus wondered why it hadn't come up sooner. Of course, families should have some agency in determining their own futures. Director Chun from New Geneva spoke up. Currently, resettlement assignments are based primarily on available capacity and general demographic matching, but not on what families actually want or what would make them happy, Emma observed. Administrator Singh was nodding slowly. What if we created a matching system based on compatibility rather than just availability? Families with specific interests, skills, or cultural needs paired with communities that would value those contributions. Queen Silthareth's harmonic purr was becoming almost musical, a resettlement process based on mutual benefit and genuine compatibility. Families empowered to choose their futures based on informed options rather than administrative convenience. Marcus felt a growing sense of excitement about the direction these negotiations were taking. What had started as a diplomatic crisis was evolving into something much more significant, a fundamental rethinking of how displaced populations could be helped to rebuild meaningful lives. Your Radiance, he said, what would it take to implement this kind of system across all refugee resettlement programs? The Queen considered the question carefully. Significant coordination between worlds, extensive cultural and community assessment protocols, and, most importantly, a shift in perspective from viewing refugees as burdens to be managed to recognizing them as potential contributors to be welcomed. She gestured toward the assembled group. But we have already begun that shift in this very room. Families are making their needs known directly. Host worlds are recognizing opportunities they had not previously considered. We are developing frameworks that prioritize human dignity alongside practical logistics. Emma yawned suddenly, the long day of serious discussions finally catching up with her. Marcus realized that they had been in session for nearly 6 hours, and his daughter had been an active participant throughout. Perhaps we should adjourn for today, Queen Silthareth suggested, noticing Emma's fatigue. We have made extraordinary progress, and I suspect our young consultant needs proper rest before tomorrow's sessions. As the various representatives began gathering their materials and preparing to leave, Administrator Singh approached Marcus directly. Mr. Chun, I hope you'll consider Kepler Prime for your own resettlement. Based on today's discussions, I think Emma would find our communities very welcoming, and your perspective would be invaluable as we implement these new approaches. Marcus looked down at Emma, who was sleepily hugging Mr. Peanuts. What do you think, sweetheart? Does Kepler Prime sound interesting? Do they have good schools and libraries and places to make sandwiches? She asked drowsily. Administrator Singh smiled. We do, and after today's discussions, I think we're going to make them even better. As they prepared to return to their quarters, Queen Silthareth called Marcus over privately. You have given me more than comfort food and diplomatic perspective, she said quietly. You have reminded me why this work matters. Every family around that table represents millions more who deserve the chance to rebuild lives of meaning and joy. You've given us something too, your radiance. Hope that our futures might be more than just survival. The Queen's great head tilted thoughtfully. I believe we are creating something new here, a model for resettlement that other sectors could adopt. Your willingness to share your story, Emma's insights, the courage of other families to speak their needs, this could change how we approach displacement across the galaxy. Marcus felt the weight of that possibility. What had started with a simple sandwich was rippling outward into changes that could affect millions of lives. Your radiance, whatever happens with our own resettlement, I want to thank you for listening to us, for recognizing that families have voices worth hearing. Thank you, Marcus Chun, for reminding a queen that sometimes the most important diplomacy happens around a simple meal shared with genuine care. As they walked back through the station corridors, Emma took his hand sleepily. Daddy, do you think we're really helping? Marcus looked around at the bustling refugee families, many of whom he now recognized from their expanded negotiations. Families who were no longer just waiting for assignment, but actively participating in planning their futures. I think we're helping a lot, sweetheart. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. Emma smiled and squeezed his hand, like making sandwiches for someone who's homesick. Exactly like that. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, and new opportunities to advocate for refugee families across the galaxy. But tonight, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since fleeing their home world. Genuine hope for a future that offered more than mere survival, but the chance to build a life filled with meaning, community, and love. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of their new home on Kepler Prime, preparing Emma's lunch for her first day at the integrated community school. The morning sunlight streamed through windows that looked out onto a garden where Thraxian flameflowers grew alongside earth roses, tended by families from both species who had discovered a shared love of horticulture. The kitchen itself was a testament to the new approach to resettlement that had emerged from those negotiations. Instead of standard-issue refugee housing, families had been matched with communities based on compatibility and mutual benefit. Marcus and Emma had been placed in Harmony District, a neighborhood specifically designed around the principles they had helped develop. The bread he was using came from the local bakery, operated by a Centauri refugee family whose grain expertise had revolutionized the colony's agriculture. The peanut butter substitute had been improved through collaboration between human food scientists and Zephyrian biochemists. Even the simple act of making a sandwich had become part of a larger tapestry of cultural exchange and mutual enrichment. "Daddy, don't forget the note." Emma called from the living room, where she was organizing her school supplies with characteristic precision. Marcus smiled, pulling out a small piece of paper to write the daily message that had become their tradition. Today's note read, "Remember that every new friend you make is a bridge between worlds. Love, Dad." It was true in ways that went beyond metaphor. Emma's class included children from 7 different species, all learning together in an environment that celebrated diversity rather than merely tolerating it. Her best friend was a young Draknari named HFY, whose family had relocated to Kepler Prime as part of the cultural exchange program that Queen Silthareth had established. The sound of approaching footsteps made Marcus look up. Through the kitchen window, he could see Administrator Singh, now Director Singh, walking up their garden path. She had become a regular visitor, not in her official capacity, but as a friend whose own family had been enriched by the community transformation. "Good morning, Marcus," she called as she entered through the front door. The informal visiting customs were another change that had emerged from the new settlement approach, communities where people felt comfortable dropping by to share morning coffee and planning sessions. "Morning, Priya. Emma's almost ready for school. Want some coffee while you wait? Please. And I have news about the evaluation results." Marcus felt a flutter of anticipation. The Kepler Prime pilot program had been monitored closely by refugee organizations across the galaxy. Their success or failure would determine whether the new approach would be adopted more widely. Emma bounded into the kitchen, her backpack properly loaded and Mr. Peanuts tucked safely inside. Directosinch. Is it good news or nervous news?" Priya laughed. "Definitely good news, Emma. The evaluation committee has officially approved our model for galaxy-wide implementation. 12 additional worlds have requested to implement similar programs." Marcus felt a surge of pride and accomplishment that went far beyond personal satisfaction. The changes they had helped design were rippling outward, potentially affecting millions of refugee families across known space. What were the key metrics that convinced them? He asked, pouring coffee for himself and Priya while Emma grabbed her lunch. Family satisfaction rates improved from 37% to 91%. Community integration success jumped from 42% to 88%. But most importantly, host communities reported significant improvements in cultural vitality, economic innovation, and social cohesion. Emma nodded sagely. "That means everybody got happier, not just the refugee families." "Exactly right," Priya confirmed. The mutual benefit approach exceeded everyone's projections. As they walked toward the school, Marcus reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. Instead of simply being grateful recipients of charity, refugee families had become active partners in community building. Instead of trying to fit into existing systems, they had helped create new systems that worked better for everyone. The school itself was a marvel of collaborative design. The architecture incorporated elements from multiple species' educational traditions, creating spaces that felt welcoming to children from diverse backgrounds. The curriculum had been developed through extensive consultation with refugee families, ensuring that multiple perspectives and knowledge systems were represented. At the school entrance, they encountered the daily gathering ritual that had become a beloved tradition. Children from various species shared morning greetings in multiple languages, creating a cheerful cacophony of interspecies friendship. Emma immediately joined a group that included her Draknari friend HFY, 2 human children from other refugee families, and a young Thraxian whose musical abilities had made her popular among kids who loved to sing. "Dad, will you be at the community meeting tonight?" Emma asked as she prepared to head into the building. "Wouldn't miss it. Are you going to present your research about playground designs?" "Yep. Me and ZYX figured out how to make climbing structures that work for kids with different kinds of bodies. It's going to be awesome." Marcus watched her run off with her friends, marveling at how naturally she had adapted to leadership roles in community planning. The new settlement approach included mechanisms for children to have voice in decisions that affected them, and Emma had enthusiastically embraced these opportunities. "She's remarkable," Priya observed. "Yesterday, she submitted a proposal for starting an interspecies cooking club. Her argument was that families need opportunities to share food traditions as cultural bridge building." That sounds like Emma. She's always believed that sharing food is how you make friends with people who seem different from you. As they walked back through the neighborhood, Marcus noticed details that had become routine, but still filled him with satisfaction. The community garden where multiple species collaborated on food production. The library that housed literature in 17 different languages and formats. The workshop spaces where refugee artisans taught traditional crafts to local residents while learning new techniques from their neighbors. At the community center, they encountered Queen Silthareth, who had been making regular visits to monitor the pilot program's progress. Her presence was no longer unusual. She had become something of a community fixture, beloved by children who called her Annie Queen, and respected by adults who valued her insights on intercultural cooperation. "Marcus, Director Singh." The Queen greeted them warmly. "I bring excellent news from the Galactic Refugee Council. They have formally adopted our resettlement framework as the new standard protocol." Marcus felt a deep sense of accomplishment. What had started with a simple act of kindness had evolved into systemic change that would improve the lives of countless displaced families. "Your Radiance, how many worlds have committed to implementation?" 47 have already begun transition planning. The economic benefits alone have convinced governments that viewed the approach as idealistic rather than practical. Priya consulted her datapad. The productivity increases have been remarkable. When people feel valued and integrated, their contributions to community prosperity increase dramatically. More importantly, Queen Silthareth added, the psychological health indicators show improvement across all demographic groups. Both refugee and established populations report higher levels of life satisfaction. They spent the morning reviewing implementation plans for the expanded program. Marcus had been asked to serve as a consultant for other worlds developing similar communities, sharing the practical insights he had gained from his family's experience. The work was deeply satisfying in ways that went beyond professional accomplishment. Every successful settlement meant families like his own would have opportunities to rebuild meaningful lives rather than simply surviving displacement. At lunchtime, they were joined by Ambassador Kithrak, who had become a close friend during the months of program development. The Draknari diplomat had adapted remarkably well to the informal community culture, often joining neighborhood gatherings and contributing his own perspective on interspecies cooperation. "Marcus, I have a personal question," the ambassador said as they shared a meal of fusion cuisine that had become popular in their diverse community. "Queen Silthareth and I have been discussing the possibility of establishing a permanent diplomatic residence here on Kepler Prime. Would your family be interested in serving as cultural liaisons for the program?" Marcus was stunned. The offer represented not just employment, but a chance to continue working on the issues that had become so important to his family. What would that involve exactly? Helping other refugee families navigate the settlement process, serving as advocates for community integration needs, and working with host populations to develop mutual enrichment opportunities, Queen Silthareth explained. "Essentially, formalizing the work you have already been doing." Marcus thought about Emma's enthusiasm for community planning, her natural diplomatic instincts, and her joy in helping other families feel welcome. The work would allow them to continue making a difference while building a stable life for themselves. "I need to discuss it with Emma, of course. Naturally, though I suspect she will be enthusiastic about the opportunity." That evening's community meeting proved Ambassador Kithrak right. When the offer was mentioned during the regular community updates, Emma practically bounced out of her chair with excitement. "We could help more families find homes like we did," she exclaimed. "And I could keep working on playground designs and cooking clubs and making sure kids have friends from different species." The community response was equally enthusiastic. Over the past months, Marcus and Emma had become valued members whose insights and advocacy had benefited everyone. The prospect of them taking on formal leadership roles was welcomed by neighbors who had seen the positive impact of their involvement. After the meeting, as they walked home under the alien stars that had become familiar and comforting, Emma took Marcus's hand. "Daddy, are you happy we came here?" Marcus looked around at their neighborhood, where warm lights glowed in windows belonging to families from across the galaxy. All building lives together in a community that valued difference as strength rather than challenge. "I'm more than happy, sweetheart. I am grateful." "For what?" "For the chance to help other families find what we found. For living in a place where your ideas are heard and valued. For being part of something bigger than just our own survival." Emma squeezed his hand. "And for Queen Silthareth getting hungry at exactly the right time." Marcus laughed. "Especially for that." As they entered their home, not temporary housing, but their actual home, chosen and shaped according to their needs and hopes, Marcus reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them here. What had seemed like an ending when they fled their original colony had turned out to be a beginning of something far richer than what they had lost. The simple act of making a sandwich for someone who was homesick had rippled outward into changes that affected families across the galaxy. But perhaps that was how the most important changes always happened, not through grand gestures or official policies, but through small acts of kindness that recognized the fundamental dignity and worth of every being seeking a place to belong. Emma settled into her evening routine, carefully arranging Mr. Peanuts on her pillow and organizing her school materials for tomorrow. Her current project was developing a proposal for inter-colony student exchange programs because she had decided that children from different worlds should have opportunities to learn about each other's homes and cultures. "Daddy," she said as he tucked her in, "tomorrow can you teach me how to make those Centauri sweetbread rolls? I want to bring them to ZYX's family for their celebration day." "Of course. We'll get the ingredients after school. And can you write an extra special note for my lunch? I want to share it with my friend Keith. She's been sad because her family is still waiting for permanent housing assignment." Marcus smiled, his heart full with pride for his daughter's instinctive compassion and her understanding that small gestures of kindness could make enormous differences in people's lives. "I'll write the best note ever." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Marcus stood by her window looking out at their community, their chosen home where diversity was celebrated, where families from across the galaxy worked together to build something beautiful, where simple acts of kindness had grown into systematic change that would benefit generations of displaced families. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to advocate for refugee rights and community integration. There would be families to welcome, programs to develop, and policies to refine. But tonight, in a home filled with love and surrounded by a community built on principles of mutual respect and shared prosperity, Marcus Chun felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing that sometimes the smallest gestures can indeed change the galaxy. In the kitchen, ingredients for tomorrow's Centauri sweetbread sat ready, next to a notepad where he would write another small message of encouragement for his daughter to share with a friend who needed to know she was valued and welcomed. Because that's how lasting change happened. One sandwich, one note, one act of kindness at a time, building bridges between worlds and hearts until the entire galaxy became a more welcoming home for everyone seeking safety, belonging, and the chance to build a life filled with meaning and love.